the reason we first Huddersfield first got in contact with you was about our PhD student Nick Bugiev, who started off sort of doing some study of you and your music and your work. How do you find that whole thing of the academia studying your writing? Have you read any of the academic writing about you? There have been a few papers and a few things. What do you think of them?
Of course, I'm aware of Nick's work, who was doing his PhD here and was also at the time kind of engrossed in Plastic Men Live. So, you know, in the beginning it was a little bit, like strange for me to have people kind of looking at even techno or what I'm doing from a different angle or like critically. But everybody hears sound in a different way and takes experiences from a different angle. So I think it's healthy to, you know, have this kind of open discourse and see how other people are interpreting what you're doing. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to change something, but I think it's, now I'm as a DJ, first off, this response with the audience and how that may change my direction. Like I have a mission. I have a musical mission when I play. I want, you know, and so there's only so much an audience can kind of make me deviate, and so I like to play in that in that zone. But it is part of the fascination of having that response and having a little bit of slip and play. So whether that's in a performance or whether that's in an analysis of what I'm doing or what someone thinks of my creative process, and yeah, I think again it's healthy and can sometimes make you just look at your work in a different way.
So other people are kind of trying to understand and conceptualise what you do. Do you have a way that you understand? Do you do that? I mean, your work's quite visceral, quite instinctive in some ways, but do you conceptualise things?
You know, a lot of my work is not, you know, thoroughly conceptualized. There's an idea or something that perhaps has inspired me. There maybe needs to be an experiment before I actually start being creative. Like we were talking earlier about the Andreas Gursky piece. There was a certain, I kind of had an idea of what could be done, but there was also some technical limitations and a certain aesthetic that the music had to deliver, working in this kind of combination with visual art and music together. So there's a lot of thought process in there before I actually sit down in front of the computer or in front of the synthesizers. But then for like Plastic Men type albums, there's quite often a concept, you know, like a concept of the album or certain like structure or architecture that has inspired me to go into the studio, and I'll find the equipment that is going to help me, what I think is going to help me go that direction. But then once I start, it's hanging there as an idea, but it's not that I'm overly thinking about what I'm doing, because then I really want to have something that is as fluid as possible, and that ends up being very organic and very human, but still gets put into that box that I originally was thinking about. It doesn't always work. Sometimes you kind of deviate, and I remember when I was doing, you know, Plastic Men Consumed, there was the idea of what I was trying to do, very much inspired by sculptures of Anish Kapoor, but the first 3 or 4 months of work didn't come even close to being what I wanted it to be. It actually came out later as a different album. But somewhere along the line, it was about 3 or 4 months into it, I remember doing this one piece, and I was like, okay, that's the beginning, you know. Now that I finished this other album, which isn't the album I want to release or not the album I wanted to record, it got me to that point. And as soon as I had that first track done, I was like, okay, that's what I've been trying to get to, you know. But it takes time, you know, and I think that's interesting for me, is of having a conceptual approach and an idea, but allowing it to be loose and not overly intellectualizing the pure creative process, so that it has a balance between, and I also want my music to, and everything I do, to be an emotional response first.
So how did technology seems though to be very much at the centre of your core. So how did, with that sort of the emotionality at the centre of what you do, how does that fit kind of conceptually with the way technology works for you, or is that just your instrument? I mean,
yeah, no, technology can actually get in the way, because that can actually get slow down the creative process, especially these days with, you know, so many new plugins and devices, and, you know, I've got a Eurorack system now, so it's quite easy. Oh my God, that's another module to get. So quite often, or probably nearly always, if I'm going to have a successful studio run, I make a number of decisions, either based upon equipment or sound that I'm trying to approach, or the concept of the album or the recordings, or a combination of those, and then try to lock it down, and then make as little changes to the setup or as little changes to the concept, and just try to push in that direction creatively. Now, quite often I make a system of instruments, or even patches. You know, I have a lot of different devices and effects in my studio, and I'll go to the patch bay, which probably has, I don't know, 1,000 points. And once I've got something, I kind of try to just leave it there, and I could, you know, collect dust for 4 months as I'm recording, and I'll do lots of iterations of songs and ideas as quickly as possible, and you know, just live recordings, and then go back to them after that whole bunch of work is done, maybe 2 months later, and then kind of pick and, okay, those are the good pieces, those conceptually work together. But that's later. I'm not thinking as I'm doing it, okay, well, stop that, it's not working with the concept. It's like, let's sort it out, or figure it out later.
So it's a bit like cybernetics. You're trying to kind of extend yourself using the technology, so that becomes part of you almost. It is like
cybernetics, or like bionics, or augmenting our abilities is exactly what I think a techno or a musician or a person who uses technology does. You have to find a way that it becomes like an appendage, and that you stop thinking about it and you just create. And if you're always changing or modifying that appendage or that cybernetic interface, then perhaps you're never going to find the finesse in it. You know, things do need to evolve and to develop, you know, styles, or there's an update of a piece of equipment, there's a new OS which that is better, but just because it's better doesn't mean it's better right now. Maybe it's better for the next project in 6 months. So I really try, and it's very hard, it's not always a perfect science to lock things down. And you know, speaking about Eurorack, you know, I've got friends who've got, you know, racks and racks and racks, and what I've done lately, which has allowed me to do music very quick with the Eurorack system, is I have 3 small racks, and I've kind of made one mixers and routing. One is more sound sources, and one is more effects, and I've locked that down. And okay, I will buy a couple new things, but I just kind of put them away until I dismantle that and make a new system. So they're kind of like self-contained little synths that all have their own way of working.
You seem to like to get to know your things so well that you can kind of get lost in them. There's the analogy some people have used of the sort of techno shaman, that thing of journeying, and you do, so when you were performing you seem to be sort of lost in that journeying process. How's that sort of loss for you, and how does that relate, these 2 questions, to that thing people talk about of DJs taking the audience on a journey? Do you just go on your journey and try and bring them along, or is it...
I think, of course, it is your journey, but you can't forget that there's an audience in front of you as a DJ. You can for moments or for periods of time where you really, it's kind of like jazz, you kind of go off on this tangent, and then somehow you know, find the moment where everyone's still with you but maybe losing a bit of concentration, and then you come back You take a step forward to the audience again, kind of get their trust, and then go back off. But it is a very hypnotic game. It's storytelling. It's dynamics and moving with emotions and frequencies, and it has to be, for me, for the type of music that I like to make and like to produce and like to perform, somehow hypnotic, so that people, stop thinking and just become wrapped up in sound and frequencies. And that's probably also why I don't overly conceptualize when I'm in the recording process, because I don't want to really think. It's sometimes you're creating and working, and the moment of thought is for me, okay, I've got something, press record and start, and then, okay, I just came out, 14 minutes, done, finish. And thinking, okay, it's kind of like checking the air, and yeah, I think I got it. Sometimes you'll listen to it again to check that you got it, or sometimes it's like, I got it, I don't want to think about it anymore. Erase all the patterns and start again. Especially if I feel I'm kind of in the moment, and I have all the right things patched, and the frequencies are sounding good. I'll try to do as many things as possible while it feels right. That could be a song every day for 7 days, or it could be, okay, I'm not going home tonight and do 4 songs in a row. Even 4 iterations or remix of each other, and just quickly as possible, knowing that there's some magic happening, and then look back later and see if there was magic or how much magic was there.
Well, it's interesting you used the term magic, and you were talking about sort of hypnotic thing, and that minimal stuff that you're very associated with is very sort of connected to sort of Zen, and a lot of, especially the early dance music scene you were involved in, was very tied up to kind of transcendental experiences and loss of self, and quite sort of spiritual. Perhaps that's maybe a slightly misused word.
Mm.
Is that still part of what you do? Is that still there in the scene that you see, or is it much more sort of secular and industrialised now?
I don't know if it's as I don't know if it's there as much as it used to be. I think the scene has changed. But I also, for me, it was more about hypnotism and about losing yourself and kind of freeing yourself in frequencies, rather than a kind of a higher power of spirituality or something like that. I think it was more about having freedom to kind of let go, and that's what I love about minimalistic electronic music, that there's this space and freedom within the music to kind of let go and be part of the frequencies of kicks and claps and snares, but not overly, not hanging too much weight on me as a listener or as a producer, just having room to breathe in this space of music.
The University of Huddersfield, inspiring tomorrow's professionals.